Hello students, my name is Niyati Said and thanks for watching Wikipedia word videos. My topic for the presentation is classification of vertebrate animals. As we have already read in detail about the animal kingdom, now we are in a position to classify vertebrate animals. Okay, so let's proceed towards our topic, that is classification of vertebrate animals. So students, is this animal a bird or a reptile? It's a bird, of course. My dear students, how do you know it? That it is a bird? What makes this animal a bird? Where does it live? Does it lay egg? How does it move around? How do you know that it is a bird? It lives on land. Yes, it lays egg. And yes, it uses its wings for moving around. So all this told you that this animal is a bird and not a reptile. Okay. So how does it breathe? It uses its lungs. How is its skin like? It has feathers. Is this animal a bird or reptile, students? Of course, it's a reptile. How do you know what makes this animal a reptile? Where does it live? Does it lay eggs? How does it move around? Answer to these questions here. Where does it live? Yes, it lives on land. Does it lay eggs? Yes, it lays egg because these are oviparous. How does it move around? It uses its legs for moving around. Is this animal a bird or a reptile? How does it breathe? It uses its lungs. And what is its skin like? It has scales or dry scales. Now come to the mammals. What makes an animal a mammal? Is it giving live birth or having hair or fur? What about feeding their babies? Well, kind of. I'll tell you at the end what really does. First, let's go through these three. Live birth. Of course, not all mammals give live birth. Monotreme mammals, including the echidna, okay, and platypus, don't give birth to live young. They lay eggs, okay. So not all mammals give live birth to their young ones, okay. Now come to the hair part. What about having hair or fur? All mammals have hair or fur, right? Well, I suppose technically baby dolphins have whiskers, but you would not know it from the adults. Pangolins, if we talk about, with the armor-like plates, actually have little bit of fur on their underside, okay? And if we talk about the mole rat, naked mole rat, then technically they are not completely naked. They also have whiskers, but they are mostly naked. Okay, so we will give here a maybe. Mammals do have hair, but there are several cases where one might mistake a mammal for not having hair. Now come to the milk. Do all mammals feed their babies milk? First, the snacky answer is no. Male mammals generally do not make milk, okay, although they could. Second, more serious answer, yes. I don't know of any species of a mammal that nourishes their offspring with anything other than milk, okay. Actually, what makes mammal is more than just whether they give live birth, because not all do, and have hair and lactate, and doing each of these things does not necessarily mean the animals should be classified as a mammal, okay. Always note that although it gives birth, a tiger shark is not a mammal. It is a shark. Sharks are a kind of a fish. So what does the mammal? If we talk about shared evolutionary history, then mammals are a group of a species that are related by the evolutionary history. And The classification of mammals was made based off a shared physical and anatomical characteristic, but underlying those is a shared evolutionary history. We do make subdivision within that larger grouping of mammals. For example, egg-laying mammals, platypus and echidna, are prototheria, while all other mammals are called therians. There are many other sub-classifications, but they are still part of the broader group of mammals. There are also larger groupings, for example on the tetrapods. These are all descendants from the common ancestral population of the tetrapods that are generally four-limbed vertebrates. So how do you tell what a mammal is? Well, the broad rules of thumb still apply. If you are a naturalist roaming through some uncharted region and you happen across an animal you have never seen, you can start with some of the general physical characteristics. For example, is it a warm-blooded? Does it have fur? But now you can also take a look of its DNA as another line of evidence. You can collect and sequence a sample of DNA from hair, a blood, a toenail, or even from a scat, and then compare the sequences you find with sequences that are already available to learn more about the creature you sampled. You can build a tree based on the similarity between the sequences. The relationship between the sequences for any one of reason or gene may not reflect a broader history, but it will give you an idea of where your species fit. And more DNA sequences you analyze, the better your resolution will be. So, mammal is a term we use to describe the group of a species that generally share a definite set of characteristics, such as warm-blooded. They are lactating, that means they milk, and which nourishes their young ones. They give live birth, they have fur, they have hair, and share an evolutionary descent. Okay. So these are the characteristics that makes animal a mammal. They live on land, they are viviparous, they use legs to move around, they breathe using their lungs. Now come to the class aves. What makes a bird a bird? So answer to this question is bill. All bills have a bony keratin covered projection that forms their mouth. They have wings. Wings are one of the most defining characteristics of bird, and even flightless birds have vestigial or adapted wings. They may be used for swimming, thread displays, or the courtship dances. Third characteristic is feathers. All birds have evolved feathers which are composed of keratin and other proteins and light reflecting pigments to serve as body insulation. They all are endothermic in nature. That means they are warm-blooded, which means they generate their own internal body heat and they do not rely exclusively on their environment to maintain their temperature. They are egg-laying. All birds lay amniotic eggs as a part of their reproductive cycle. Okay. Now come to the reptile zone. The two biggest clues are that they are cold-blooded. Unlike mammals and aves, they are covered in triscales. They live on land. Reptiles are born on land and are born with strong instincts, so they are on their own at birth. Just think, no parents to nag them around cleaning their rooms. They use legs to move around. They breathe using their lungs. They have triscales. Okay, all these are the features that make an animal a reptile. Okay. So what makes an amphibian? They live on land and water because they have double lives. Amphi means double and bios means lives. So amphibians have double lives. They oviparous, that means they lay eggs. They use legs to move around. They breathe using their lungs or skin. They have bare skin. Okay. What makes an animal a fish? They live in water, they are oviparous, that means they lay eggs, they use fins to move around, they breathe using their gills, they have shiny scales. So what is the conclusion? What is the interpretation between mammals, birds and reptiles? Mammals are viviparous, they live in land, they use legs to move around and they have fur or hair. On the contrary to this, birds are oviparous. That means they lay eggs. Okay, live on land. They use wings to move around. They have feathers. Reptiles are also oviparous. They also live on land. They have legs to move around, and they have scales on their dry skin. So what do the three have in common? Land, land, and land. That means they live on land. What is the difference between mammals and reptiles? Mammals are warm-blooded. On the contrary to this, reptiles are cold-blooded. Mammals have hair or fur, whereas reptiles have scaly skin. Mammals, they have live birth, whereas reptiles, they mostly lay eggs. Okay, what is in common between mammal and reptiles? That they both are vertebrates. They breathe with lungs. Okay, what is difference between reptiles and fishes? Reptiles, they have lungs. Some live on land, others live in water. On the contrary to this, fish, they have gills and they live in water. What they have common? They both are vertebrates. They are cold-blooded. They hatch from eggs and they have a scaly skin. Okay, let's see the differences once again. Mammal, bird, reptile, amphibian, and fishes. Where they live, how they have their young, how they move around, how they breathe, and their skin. Mammals, they live on land. They are viviparous. That means they nourishes their young ones milk. Okay, only female produces milk. Okay, how they move around? They use his legs to move around for the movement. How they breathe? They use his lungs, and their skin is covered with fur and hair. Now come to birds. They also live in land. They are oviparous. That means they lay eggs. How they move around? They use his wings. How they breathe? They use lungs to breathe, and their skin is covered with feathers. Now come to reptiles. They also live on land, and they are oviparous. They use legs or shelter. How they breathe? They use his lungs for breathing, and their skin or dry skin is covered with scales. Now come to amphibians. Amphibians, they live both on land and water. They are oviparous. They use legs movement, and they breathe by lungs or through skin. Okay, and now come to the fishes. Fishes, they live in water. They lay eggs, and they use fins and tails to move around, and they breathe by the oxygen which is dissolved in the water, and their skin is covered with scales. Okay, so this comes to an end. Thank you, and stay tuned and keep watching Edupedia word videos.